So, welcome back, everybody, for ID24. This is now the 14th session of the day. ID24 is brought to you by the Paciello Group with a kind support from Barclays and the Centre for Inclusive Design. You can find out more about those organizations on our website. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel for all future event streams and videos. And a quick hello and thank you to organizations who have decided to host their own local ID24 event. And currently we should have Sapient Razorfish in Germany, who are streaming ID24 on 4 of their locations. Don't forget to send questions for presenters by tweeting with the hashtag ID24. We'll pass these questions on to the presenters at the end of their presentation, and for each session, the best question will also receive a free 90-day JAWS license. And note that on YouTube, the chat is open, but we are not monitoring it for questions. It's just there for participants to talk amongst themselves. So what we've got now is Mark Robbins is going to talk to you about accessibility in HTML email. The floor is yours, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for having me, and yeah, thanks for everybody who's tuning in. So yes, I'm talking about accessibility in HTML email. Now, HTML email is one of those things that I know a lot of developers really dislike doing. I mean, they're wrong. It's much more fun than building websites, but that's a different talk. Accessibility in email is one of those things that I hear a lot of developers dislike because of the complexity of it and because of the restrictive nature of it. And interestingly, those are similar complaints that I hear from people when talking about accessibility. Similar in the way that a few small things can go a long way to improving the experience overall. So yeah, I am Mark Robbins. I'm an email developer. It means I don't really touch websites, haven't built a website or worked on a website for over 3 years now. I work for a company called Rebel, and we build tools for creating HTML emails. So part of my job is to actually put accessibility into that code that we generate. I actually I took the idea to my boss and I said, you know, we need to do something about accessibility. And I was very lucky that they completely agreed and they said, yes, this is a priority. We need to get this done. Other people I know, it's a bit difficult, it's a harder sell, but it is one of those things I think is essential. So yeah, please ask me questions with the hashtag ID24. Also on Twitter, if you want to follow up anything afterwards or later in the week or anytime, it's M_J_Robbins and @GoRebelMail. So first up, I want to talk about sort of why we should care about accessibility in email. And it's one of those things, I'm sure if you're watching all 24 hours of talk today, which I hope you are, lots of coffee, then people will be talking about why accessibility is important and how to get buy-in. So this is my take on it, sort of looking at it from an email perspective. First of all, if we look at some stats, there's some stats I've got. 15 to 20% of people have difficulty reading, have reading difficulties. That's including dyslexia. I struggle quite a lot with reading sometimes. That's quite significant. Now, to put that into relatable terms to email, 22% of emails are opened on Gmail. So if you were to find, as an email developer, if you were to find a bug in Gmail, that would be pretty high priority to fix that. If people aren't able to read your content in Gmail, you want to get dealing with that pretty high priority. So it's the same thing here. Just to give a bit more ideas, 8% of Caucasian males suffer from some form of color blindness. So we can equate that to 8% of emails opened in Outlook. 7% of working age adults have severe dexterity difficulties. And that's a number that goes up as well when you go over the working age. So we think about sort of the future as well, like for ourselves. If you want to be selfish about it, then make sure you can use things as you get older. We equate that to 8% of emails being opened on Apple Mail. That's the desktop Apple Mail, not the mobile. 3 to 4% of people can't see well enough to read. We can equate that to 3% of emails being opened on Yahoo Mail. So the point I'm making here is, as an email developer, I look at the analytics. I look at where people are opening their emails, and based on that, we prioritize bugs and bug fixes. All of these are high priority fixes. So the analytics are not as accurate with sort of looking at accessibility needs, but so you just look at these global ones, you get the research where you can, and it is as important, if not more so, that as these can spread across different email clients, everybody, it doesn't matter what email client you're using, you could still be having trouble getting to the content if it's not done in the right way. So as I said, email rendering is complex. It's very complex. I just want to sort of look through that and sort of a little bit and how that can sort of affect the accessibility of it. So first of all, here's a quote from Chad White. Chad's a brilliant email marketer. He wrote a blog post sort of digging into the complexity of email rendering. And he came up with this statistic that every email that marketers send has approximately 15,000 potential renderings. And that's using conservative maths. Now that sounds pretty high. It sounds ridiculously high. But if we break it down, it's actually, you can see his workings out. That's 2 ESPs. So these are email service providers. These are the ones that do the actual send of the message. 15 different operating systems, 50 different email clients, 5 screen sizes, and 2 image states. So the image states are, some email clients will, by default, when you open the email, the images will be turned off. So you won't see the images until you click to download the images. And there's actually more than that because of the way that they're turned off can affect the layout as well in different ways. But that adds up to a conservative estimate of 15,000 potential renderings. The 2 main ones to consider here are the ESPs and the email clients. So when you upload your code to an ESP, they will run it through a preprocessor. Then part of that will add code, remove code, edit code, and it will just change what you've uploaded. Again, when that code hits the email clients, they will do a similar thing, similar preprocessor, and they will add, remove, edit the code in their own way. So that makes it very hard to predict what's happening. And some of those edits can affect accessibility. So I'm going to sort of dig into that a little more. First of all, the absolute basics, H&P tags. Now, these are something that hopefully everybody's using, but unfortunately that's not the case in email. I hear people say that there's inconsistencies, and there are inconsistent default styling across email clients. And that inconsistency is probably a little bit more than the inconsistency you get between browsers. And for that reason, I see a lot of people wrapping text in spans or just in a TD as part of a table, rather than using the sort of H tags, the heading tags, and the P tags, paragraph tags. And it's not actually that hard to fix this one. Really just set a margin and it will work fine. The fonts will be inherited. If you set a margin, you'll get consistent rendering. And then you set fonts, sizes, and colors, and whatever else you want to set per client. But it's the margin is the real one to get the consistency here. So really use them. But a lot of people don't, but I don't think people realize quite how simple that is as just setting a margin. Something that's a little bit more complex is tables. So Outlook desktop on Windows and the Windows Mail app, which comes as sort of a default mail app when you install Windows 8 and upwards, I think. They don't use a regular rendering engine. Instead, they use Microsoft Word to render the HTML. Now, this causes a few issues. One of them is that it doesn't respect the width on certain elements. So if I put a paragraph tag in, the width will stretch across the full screen, making it very difficult to read. So to constrain the width, we can use tables. So we use a table to set the width of our content. And there are quite a few issues with that in terms of accessibility. When you're using assistive technology, going through each table cell is actually and can be very frustrating. So for that reason, we want to keep tables to a minimum. I've seen some emails that have been sent. I've received emails that have had over 200 tables in a single email, which is definitely not needed. For example, I see a lot of people wrapping, every image is wrapped in a table, every paragraph is wrapped in a table, or if not wrapped in a table, we wrapped in a new table row and or new table data. Really, that's not needed at all. So what you do need tables for, if you're changing the background, so common sort of design pattern would be to have a dark background on a footer, perhaps, to separate it from the main content. So you change the background there. Yeah, you can use a new table for that. Changing the width. So if you want to do this sort of common thing would be a 600 pixel width central column. Yep, use a table for that. If you want to do something again, shrinking the width inside that, other ways around it, but it gets complicated. So tables are consistent. Adding multiple columns, if you're doing multi-column layouts, then yeah, you need tables for that currently. So we do have to use them, but if we are using them, you can add this role equals presentation onto every layout table. And what this code does is it makes the table semantically neutral. So it's as if you were building with a div-based layout. Now, I believe this is getting upgraded to, it'll be role equals none would be the replacement for this, which will be coming in at some point soon, I believe. Using presentation. And it's every layout table, but if you are using a table for its intended purpose, like if you have a table of data, you don't need to add this because you do want that context of each cell and each row and sort of in relation to its headings. So I've got a little video here of a screen reader. I've got two tables, one with role presentation and one without it. So I'll just show you the difference here. Hopefully you can see this. So there, the screen reader, with the first example, announced that this is a table, and then it went through each of the three cells. With the role equals presentation, the screen reader goes straight into the header tag, straight into the content, without giving you all the information around it. It's much better user experience. Now, when you start sort of piling tables up and start nesting tables inside other tables, it gets very, very complicated, very hard to use. And I did a little on Twitter. If this is working, here we go. And I asked, how many tables do you think you use on an average in an email? Got 104 responses to that. So this is by no means scientific. It's just a small, very small segment. But from that, 6% of people said they use less than 5 tables on average. 25% of people said 5 to 15. 32% of people said 15 to 30, and 37% of people said they're using over 30 tables in a single email. So that can, without this role equals presentation, that can become unusable very quickly. So that fixes it, you putting that in. However, it's not quite that simple. This is email, and email is never simple. Some email clients actually actively remove all ARIA attributes and all rollout attributes. So we're back to square one. These tables are now rendering as tables again. Something like Outlook.com, Outlook 365 will remove that, as does AOL, Yahoo, GMX, and Web.de. Good news is I have reported this as a bug to most of those. I haven't got a contact for Web.de yet. My German isn't very good, so I've not been able to quite track down who to talk to, but I've talked to the other 4 listed there, and they are all aware of it. I haven't heard back from GMX yet, but they have sent them a report. The others I know are looking into it. So hopefully this isn't going to be an issue for too much longer. As well as email clients, removing it, there's the preprocessor of ESPs. So I ran a test. I don't have access to as many ESPs as I do email clients. So I tested, I think, about 8 different ESPs. And from what I tested, it was only MailChimp that removed the ARIA attributes. However, I have talked to the MailChimp team as well. And I know this is something that they are actually working on right at this moment. So hopefully we're going to see that very soon, that they will start supporting that and stop removing the ARIA attributes and role attributes from the code that you upload. So if this role equals presentation isn't working on our table, we have to look at another way around to get this working. So here I've got the code as we're up to currently. So a table with 600 pixels, role presentation. So what we can use to make this work is what's called ghost table. So for those of you who might have for IE and IE conditional comments, which would only render on Internet Explorer or certain versions of Internet Explorer, we can use for Outlook. This is conditional comment, which is Microsoft Office. So here I've wrapped the table elements in this MSO conditional comment. So every other email client that doesn't use Microsoft Word rendering will just ignore that as it's a comment. It will just skip over it and look at the div which is inside it and render that. If it's on Outlook or or Windows Mail, anything using Microsoft Word rendering, it's going to render the table. So it's a bit long-winded and it does add a bit of code weight, but it does solve that accessibility issue with tables. Hopefully, though, as I say, the role presentation will be supported by more email clients soon and every ESP. Next issue I want to look at is lists. I see a lot of people, instead of doing a list, using a semantic tag here, like a UL for an unordered list or an OL tag for an ordered list. People building it completely in tables. It does give you more consistent rendering, but actually lists have really good support. If you send a normal UL and LI across every email client, it will work. It works absolutely everywhere. The only issue comes, again, this is with our friend Microsoft Word rendering engine for Outlook. If you apply a margin to the UL or OL tag, then the list will transform into this, which is a P tag with 2 span tags inside it. If it doesn't have the margin on, then it will render as a list. But if you apply a margin, it will do this. So you're losing the semantic context again here. Also, the design will be completely different because it will lose all the default stylings of a list that you would have. So you're not going to get the bullet points. You're not going to get, well, you have a little dot, but it's not a proper bullet point. It's difficult. So if you do want to use a list as you would normally. If you want to apply a margin, put a container around the list and apply the margin to that. Next issue is auto-linking. So auto-linking is something that's done by a number of email clients. I think most of them do it, mainly on mobile, but also on desktop as well. So this is where, if I was to send you a phone number, if I was to email you when it had my phone number in it, the email client will look at it and say, oh, that's a phone number, and automatically convert it into a link. So then when you tap on the phone number on your mobile device, it will then load up the phone app and start calling you. Now that's very useful for the most part. Addresses, yeah, might link to a map. Dates would link into your calendar. Website URL would just link to the browser, so it'll open the browser. And there's one that Apple are doing, which where they're linking films and music. It recognizes the title of film or bit of music. It will link it to iTunes and try and sell you stuff through that. I think that's quite intrusive. I really don't like that as a feature myself. But it's something that they're doing at the moment. So on the whole, apart from the films and music, that seems like a good idea generally. However, it's not just phone numbers that are getting linked as phone numbers, also order numbers and reference numbers. Basically, any number over 4 digits long is automatically being linked to a phone number in some email clients. Addresses, if I was to write about Exile on Main Street, might link that to the Rolling Stones album, but others might link it to a map, and that's not what I'm talking about. The context is out here. Dates, again, this date 10, 11, 12. To me, I would read that as the 10th of November 2012. For someone else, perhaps if you're in the States, you might read that as the 11th of October 2012. Or somebody else, it might be the 12th of November 2010. So the context is out here, and we don't really want to automatically link this. Interestingly as well, I sent a test out with this, and I opened it in the Outlook app on Android, and it linked this date to a phone number. So when you tapped it, it tried to call the phone number 10, 11, 12. That was just crazy. But yeah, that's strange. I've reported this bug. I think every bug I've mentioned, I have reported as best as I can. Websites generally, yeah, it's fine. Generally, you do want it to be a link. One exception might be if I'm saying new virus found on example.com. I don't really want that to be a link. I don't want to be linking people to this virus-ridden website. For the films, perhaps if I'm talking about Visit the Rocky Mountains, would that link to the Sylvester Stallone film Rocky? But obviously that's wrong context. And music, if I'm talking about new suede jackets, that might be linking to the Britpop band Suede. So the issue here that I'm trying to point out is the context is changing. These links aren't always as they should be, and they might break the context and make it a very sort of confusing link if you're talking about an order number and then you click on it using a screen reader perhaps. Yes, I'll click on this order expecting to go through to the order page on the website. Actually, it starts phoning a random phone number. That's not a very good experience at all. The other issue with auto-linking, I've got an image here of the footer of an email. So I'm using a darker background with light text on it. It's quite a common design pattern. And then in there, the phone number, email address, address and website. When that's converted into links, that text now becomes blue and underlined. So blue text on a dark background, very bad contrast, very difficult to read. So how do we deal with this? How do we fix this? The first option is there's these meta tags. So we have the name, format detection, content, telephone equals no, date equals no, address equals no, or email equals no. So what this is intended to do is to say, don't automatically detect this and convert these into links. I've put this in every email that I've sent for a few years now, and I've not seen it work once. Unfortunately, the email clients aren't respecting this. I think that's an oversight. I think they really should start looking into this because of the accessibility issues I mentioned. But until that's fixed, there are a few other options. The first option here I have is a CSS option. Here I've got a body tag and then tag. So this is going to target every link within the email. And that this now has font inherit, color inherit, text declaration none. You could target this just to a particular section, which would be better, but this is targeting the entire email. If you do use this, then please, please, please make sure you add inline styles onto the links that you want to look like links. Also, this doesn't fix the issue with screen readers. As you tab through, it's still going to read it out as a link, as we can't deal with that any other way. Another thing you can apply here, I wouldn't advise it, but pointer events none would make the link not clickable. But you could add that as well if you really wanted to. Another solution is to use zero width non-joiners. So that's ampersand ZWNJ semicolon. This won't affect the layer. It's a zero width, so it's not going to affect the layout of the text. When it renders, it will still read, it will still look normal. But as the email client is scanning through the code, it won't recognize that example I have there as an email address because it's broken up by these zero width non-joiners. It can affect screen readers and the way it reads things out. So if you are putting them in, just try and put them in places that would make sense, natural breaks rather than in the middle of words. So both these examples have some support. They work in most places, but not everywhere. The one that does work everywhere is actually just putting a link in. So if you have a phone number, link it to put an A tag around it and link it to a phone number and style it how you want. That will work. If there's already a link on something, then the email client isn't going to auto link it. So that is a solution. However, you don't want to link everything. If it's sort of linking various bits of like dates or numbers or references and things like that, you don't want everything to be a link. That just confuses things and gives a bad user experience and bad accessibility, really, if every word is a link. So it's a tricky one. It's best, really it's a compromise. You've got to judge each case on its own and look into what the best option is for that specific use case. It's a tricky one, the auto-linking issue. Next up, images. So a lot of people, to get around the rendering variations of email clients, people are just putting everything in images, putting their text into images, and you get consistent rendering. However, this is generally not done very well, and there are a few issues around that. First of all, you lose the hierarchy. You don't have like any sort of semantic context of what bits of text are what, because it's all in one image. You can, if you do put your alt text in, then it's just reading it out as a block of text. You don't have any kind of paragraph or heading. You can add that if you want, but it's not really something I see people do, and definitely not done very well. If you want to zoom in on this image, so if you're using some kind of magnifier, this is an image, so it'll pixelate and it will blur as you zoom in. It won't be as readable. Also, the text can't be modified to suit user preferences. So if I set in the operating system to increase the font size, that's not going to carry through onto the text. If I have a filter which perhaps changes the font to something more readable, that's not going to work on text. Also, applying a filter to increase the contrast, that's not going to work on an image of text there either. And a point, not so much accessibility, more about just general marketing point of view. If you're sending an email with text in it, it's not searchable for the inbox. If I send you a link saying, check out our great new offers, a couple of days later, you want to find that email again, you search in your inbox, it's not going to come up. So if you're having trouble sort of selling this idea of using live text, that's one that sort of will speak to the marketers and the people who are more concerned about money than being good people. So I want to show you a couple of examples of like common things, annoyingly common things that happen in email of bad uses of alt text. So here's the first one.
Sorry, Mark, we're still not hearing it.
Oh, okay. So this one is where they haven't put in alt text. So so here they have some links in their navigation of new arrivals, men, women, sale. Sort of standard navigation which mirrors their website. And but because there's no alt text, it's just reading out the URL, and the URLs of these images are launch menu 01, launch menu 02, 03, 04. So you've got no context of what these links are going to. Further down in this email, they're using an image map, and it will say link HB1, link HB2, and again, no context. And with the image map, it's not even highlighting where that's going to show. These videos are on YouTube. I'll send links out if you want to see the actual examples. Unfortunately, yeah, it's not working in the presentation today. I'll try this one quickly. Let me know if it does work.
Still very, very quiet, I'm afraid.
Okay, so this one is it's got 3 images in this email, and the alt text is, your images on, shop AEO. Turn your images on, shop AEO. So what they've done here is, as I mentioned earlier, some email clients don't show the images by default. So instead, you'll see a broken image, but with the alt text. What a lot of people do is add styling onto that alt text to make it look a bit more enticing, make the design look better for when the images are turned off. That's good, definitely do that. What not to do is what's happened in this case is they've just written the text, turn your images on, to try and get people to turn the images on to see it. At the top of this email, oops, I can't actually, let's get back to the beginning. Oh, here we go. So at the top of this email, there's an image of text. It's basically an H1 and a P tag, what it should be, but it's one image without alt text. Very, very easy to recreate that. Then we've got a button with learn more. Again, very easy to recreate that with HTML. And then an image without alt text, but it should just have a little bit of alt text on there. So this is something definitely not to do. This is an example was found by Remy Parmentier. He shared this on Twitter a little while ago. A developer, and he shared this, and I think this is a prime example of something that happens far more often than you would think it does. And these things, that it's just down to sort of, I suppose, educating the developers that this is not what alt text is for, and telling people, like, making sure people understand that. Often email is left to sort of the marketing department rather than developers, and they don't have a background in development. They're not aware. So we need to raise this awareness among the people who are creating these things. Next up, I want to talk about interactive email. So up until now, I've been talking about sort of some of the more sort of fundamental everyday things of email and accessibility. With the interactive email is a new trend that's coming in, and it's got a lot of its own unique issues within accessibility that I've been working on. So this is what I specialize in, interactive email. My definition of it is an action in an email that triggers an event within the same email. So what I mean by that is normally, traditionally in email marketing, you will send an email out saying, click here, go to our website and do stuff. With interactive email, it's you click here and you do stuff while staying in the inbox. So this is, it has improves conversion and better user experience, generally speaking. But there are some accessibility issues I want to get into. I'm just going to show you a couple of quick examples so you know what interactive is, what I'm talking about here. So this is this is a concept email of the sort of stuff we build at Rebel. This was a concept, but we're building bits similar to this. So here's a shopping cart. You've got a few products in there. You can add and remove products from your cart. You can change the quantity. You can click through onto another page and maybe change the size and color of the product. And then further down in the email, you can click to select a credit card and a shipping address and then click the button and you'll buy it. And this is all in the inbox. You're not visiting the website here at all. So this is all powered with CSS. It's all CSS interactivity. So I'm going to get onto that in a minute. But before that, I just want to show you another example of an interactive email. This one is Type E. This is a newsletter from a great email developer called Paul Airy. And he writes this Type E newsletter. It's about email, it's about typography, and this particular issue in this example is about accessibility. Now, what he does in the top left corner of this, he has 3 buttons. So you can actually click to increase the font size in the email, or you can change the contrast. So instead of having a white background, black text, you can switch it to have a blue background with white text on it. So this is a great example of enhancing accessibility with interactive email. But the problem is interactive CSS isn't accessible by default. A label, which is based on radio buttons and labels, or most of this technology, label isn't focusable or clickable without a mouse. and there's no context for screen readers to announce what's happening. The screen reader doesn't know that this is a button to change the font size, for example. So normally on the web, you'd fix this with JavaScript, but JavaScript doesn't work in email. So we have to look at a CSS solution for it. So I'm going to show you the example first before I show you the code. Again, that's going to be an issue with the sound, isn't it? I'll skip through it as we won't have the sound, but I'll share that video later. But essentially, if you don't have the accessible code added to it, then it will just read the label as if it were text. It won't say it's a button. But with this code I add into it, it will say this is a tick box and it's unchecked, and then it'll read out the label for the tick box, which in this example is I love CSS. And then when you click on, and it says you can click on it, and then when you click on it, it will say that this is now checked, and then when you click on it again, it will say it's now unchecked. So it'll announce the label of the button, it will announce that it is a checkbox, and it will announce the change of the state as you do it. This is all without JavaScript. So here's the code I use for it. I also have a link at the bottom here to view it on CodePen. So I have a label wrapping everything. So if you click inside the label, then that will change the state of the button. So it's a large target for people to click on. Then inside that, I have a checkbox, that's controlling the functionality, but it's set to display none. Because checkboxes, I really don't like them. They're very small, and they're white with a faint border, and a background by default would be white. And you can't scale them, you can't style them easily. They're really bad for accessibility generally. So what I've done here is I've put a div with the class of faux checkbox. In that, I've made a bigger, bolder, easy, more visible checkbox. But this is a div, so it has no context. So we add role button onto this, so that this is now seen as a button, and that also makes it clickable from a screen reader. And tab index 0, so it's focusable as well. So we can tab to it, we can click it. To give it a name, I've added the ARIA label tick box. So as you focus on it, it will say this is a button or a tick box. And then I've got ARIA described by checkbox label and status. So checkbox label, I'm linking that to a span which has got the label of I like CSS. And the status is, this is sort of where the clever bit comes into, I guess. The status is linking to a div which is visually hidden. So sighted users won't see this. And inside that div, there's two spans, one for checked, one for unchecked, with that text inside it. When the radio button is checked, then the checked span is set to display. When it's unchecked, then the unchecked then that's hidden, the checked is hidden, and the unchecked is set to display. So at the very, very top here on the label, we have ARIA Live Polite. So as this changes, and as this is set to display none and display block, these will then change around, and the polite will then announce the change in the state. There is still an issue on this in that reader, it works. I've tested it on a few, and it seems to work okay. If you're using a keyboard without a screen reader, it's still not clickable. I'm still working on that. It's a work in progress, and I'm trying to work out a way of getting there. This example is just for a checkbox, but you can expand this out to all of the interactivity that I showed you earlier to announce the changes of the state of what's happening and to make everything clickable. So starting to run out of time. So I want to sort of just talk a little bit about just what's happening in the email world about accessibility. So maybe a year, maybe 18 months ago, I hadn't heard about accessibility in email. Nobody was really talking about it. Nothing was happening. But the email community is really good. They're sort of really sort of tight-knit group, and people like to share ideas. So there's a lot going on. There's a channel now has a dedicated accessibility channel. So, and there's a lot of conversation going on there where people can just go and talk specifically about accessibility in email. And it is quite active. the Email Design Conference, which is sort of the biggest conference specifically about email coding and design, not so much on the market. There's others about marketing. This one's very much about that side of it. They have talks about accessibility, and that sort of seems to be, I think, the last 2, maybe 3 years. The last 2 years, I think it's been in, and I'm pretty sure they're going to continue, like, try and make sure they cover it. Email and Acid did a great webinar about email accessibility, went into a lot of detail. That's worth looking up. The Email Design Podcast, they talk about accessibility on there a fair bit. A lot of frameworks and build systems are now starting to build accessibility into it. So if you're using some kind of drag and drop editor, it's worth asking them about accessibility and if they have it built in. If you're using any kind of build system framework, if they haven't, then try and insist on it. If they are, a lot of them are doing it, then people aren't realizing that they are making accessible emails without being aware of it, which is great. And there's multiple blogs about accessibility across different websites, and it really is becoming a talking point in the email community, which is great. But we still have a long way to go. As I mentioned, there are these bugs in the email clients. We are chasing them up, trying to get them fixed. We're looking for better ways. The interactive stuff still isn't focusable with a keyboard, but trying to get around that and make some progress on that. But yeah, thanks a lot for listening. I'm Mark Robbins, and I think hopefully we'll have some time for questions now.
Yeah, hi Mark. There were no questions on the Twitters, so you're getting off lightly.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah, we did have one shout out on Twitter, who also happens to then be the winner of our 90 days JAWS license, and that was, and I apologize now because I'm probably going to mangle it. It's Per Lannereux. Let me know how I did with that one. And he just quoted, it was written in Swedish, but he just quoted some interesting stats about why email is accessible email is important. If you're only testing in Gmail and Outlook, you should know that there's an equal proportion, 20% using Gmail, who may have reduced reading skills, and equal proportion, approximately 8%, using Outlook, who have color blindness. So interesting little tidbits that he's pulled out. And probably on a personal level, just designing emails. I remember back in my corporate days, we need an HTML email newsletter was always like a dreaded phrase that you'd hear if you were in the web team. And in my case, it was at a large university. And already doing just the CSS and the styling and getting that consistent is a nightmare. But I have to admit, I managed to suppress those memories. But absolutely, this was a great reminder that on top of that, accessibility, of course, is then also a problem. I mean, it starts with the actual code, what gets stripped out, but then also issues like actual native clients. What rendering engine are they using and how accessible is that? If I'm running JAWS on top of, say, Outlook, is the Outlook rendering actually passing through the accessibility API and everything else? So there's a lot of moving parts that, as I said, I had not considered, or I was lucky enough not having to have considered. But no, it was super interesting, despite the slight hiccups with the audio. But if you've got your presentation, we'll tweak that out, the URL, and people can kind of follow up on that. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time and taking part in this. And just as a reminder again, that ID24 is brought to you by the Paciello Group, with the kind support from Barclays and the Center for Inclusive Design. And you can find out more about those organizations on our website. If you like this session, hit that like button and subscribe to the ID24 channel for any future event streams and videos. And we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back on the hour with the next session. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your presentation, Mark.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
See you soon. Bye.